Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. Now, I have here a man that is second to none in knowledge when it comes to the underworld and gangsters and mobsters, and I'm happy to have him on the show. Please welcome to Crime and Entertainment, Scott Burnstein. Scott, how you doing, my friend?
Good. Thanks for having me, Chip.
Hey, man, that's no problem at all. I've been wanting to get you on here for a minute. I know you're busy. You've had a lot of stuff going on. I've been seeing you on the TV a couple of times. You had that Hoffa thing you were on with Lawrence Fishburne. What was that? What was
that? History's Greatest Mysteries. It ran a month ago, and we're actually doing a follow-up that will run this summer, connected to the Jimmy Hoffa dig that's going to happen next month out in New Jersey.
Oh, wow. So they are going to do the dig.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I know you had a sit down on Larry Mazza's show a couple of weeks ago, so I'm looking forward for that as well. But
and then I got the Black Mafia Family docuseries is coming out in the summer as well. Same people that did the television show with Starz and G Unit 50 Cents. So I've been working on that, both scripted and unscripted, for the last 8 months.
Wow. Yeah, Starz is doing some big things, man. 50's putting a lot of good shows out.
Yep.
Yeah, he's killing it. But today I wanted to kind of run through the Philly mob because it's one of the more interesting stories. I mean, I know every mob and every faction, every family kind of has its own story, but just everything that those guys went through after Angelo Bruno got killed was basically just like a nonstop war.
It was like a movie that lasted 25 years instead of 2 hours, and filled with drama and intrigue, and it's very Shakespearean. Brothers turning on brothers, fathers turning on sons.
Yeah, it's
for
crazy.
A family that was frankly kind of boring for about 20 years. Angelo Bruno, they called him the docile Don. I don't know if that's necessarily an accurate description of him, because he was someone that wasn't afraid to use murder as a tool for progress, both personally and professionally. But he definitely wasn't maniacal and wasn't a sociopath like some of the people that came after him.
Oh, yeah.
And so as a result, you had roughly 20 years of peace and harmony and functionality and stability, followed by 25 years of infighting and dysfunction and brothers trying to murder brothers.
Yeah. And when you say that, you're not meaning the term like an endearment, like literally brother.
No, like blood, siblings trying to kill each other, and that fell down, or that fell in opposite sides of the faction war that erupted in the 90s and existed into the 2000s.
Right. So you kind of hit on it there. Angelo Bruno was a longtime, boss there in Philly. They did call him the gentle Don or the docile Don for his reluctance to use violence. Not that he wouldn't, but I guess maybe that's,
I take, from my research, I take issue with that. I mean, it is what it is. The media, and I'm guilty of it, the media grabs a hold of a nickname or a narrative, and that they hammer it into the mythology.
Right.
So, from my research and talking to people that knew Angelo Bruno personally and worked for Angelo Bruno, I don't necessarily think he was someone that would only use violence as a final measure, or a measure of last resort. I think what gave him that nickname, you can it dates back to how he took power. You had people that I believe his own underboss when he became boss tried to have him murdered. And Bruno went to New York and solved the problem himself. And New York gave Angelo Bruno the opportunity to go back and kill this guy. But instead, Bruno decided to just shelve him.
Yeah.
So because Bruno gave a pass to someone that had tried to organize his assassination, he was tagged with this docile Don moniker that, as the years went on, didn't really fit his behavior. But because he did that, you know, I believe the guys that he was fighting with back then were, or not fighting with, but jockeying for power were Ignazia Denaro and Antonio Polina, who they called Miggs.
Okay. Now, ultimately, he is taken out. He is shot in the car. That's the famous.
He's murdered by his own people.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna get to, his own people.
His consigliere, Tony Bananas Caponegro, who ran New Jersey, ran Newark for the Philly mob, was the most likely the trigger man, as well as the quarterback of the conspiracy to murder Angelo Bruno in March of 1980.
Now, one thing I want to ask about that is I've heard different reports that his normal driver wasn't there. Was his driver or normal driver, wasn't that John Stanfa or no?
I don't think John Stanfa was his everyday driver.
So he was the driver that day.
John Stanfa was the driver that night. And I'm 100% subscribed to the belief that John Stanfa was involved in the conspiracy. And John Stanfa was given a pass because of his connections to the Gambinos, and then the Gambinos 10 years later installed him as boss. So,
and that's what I was going to say, because Caponegro didn't get that pass, and I don't even think his driver did, because
Freddie Salerno, who was him and Tony Caponegro and Freddie Salerno, who was his brother-in-law and right hand, they were duped by Fonzie Thierry of the Genovese crime family. They believed that Thierry was speaking on behalf of Vincent Gigante and Bobby Manna, Tony Salerno, when in reality he wasn't. He was speaking for himself. Wow. And then when Gigante and Manna and Salerno went to Thierry and said, "Did you give Caponegro and those guys permission?" Thierry denied it. Yeah. When in reality, Thierry had given them permission. So they acted in that hit, believing that it was sanctioned, when in reality it wasn't. And when they went to New York, they paid for it with their lives. They were brutally murdered, Caponegro and Freddie Salerno. Yeah, but if I'm not mistaken, I think they said they had stuffed their pockets with like $100 bills, or stuffed their
a lot of other things too.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the sign, just to let people know this maybe not in tune. That's leaving the message that you got a little too greedy, is what that's.
And then his Bruno's underboss, Phil Testa, who was not involved in the conspiracy to murder Bruno, but was not by the end, by 1980, Bruno and Testa were barely on speaking terms.
Okay.
And Testa was not upset that Bruno had been murdered, but he was not involved in the decision nor the plot. They called Phil Testa the Chicken Man.
Right.
Bruce Springsteen wrote a song about him.
Yeah, he's got it in that song. Yeah.
From his Nebraska album called Atlantic City. Yep. Opening line to the song is they blew up the Chicken Man last night.
Yeah.
And it's a reference to almost a year to the day that Angelo Bruno was assassinated, shotgunned to death, sitting in his car smoking a cigarette outside his South Philadelphia row house. Phil Testa, his underboss and successor, was blown up by a nail bomb on his porch in South Philly. And that's where Springsteen's lyrics came from.
Yeah, I remember the first time I'd ever heard that song, I knew exactly what he was talking about. And the guy that I was listening to, he didn't know. He was like, "What the hell does that even mean?" And I was like, "Dude, that's a whole nother rabbit hole."
Yeah.
I got nothing to do with Springsteen.
Yeah, they called him the Chicken Man. For people that don't know, they called him the Chicken Man because he owned commercial chicken coops.
Okay.
And would sell those chickens to, fried chicken joints and roasted chicken joints. So his nickname was the Chicken Man, and he was murdered by his own people, just like Angelo Bruno had. So the dysfunction was in full effect within the first couple months of Bruno's murder, even though the people that murdered Bruno were in turn murdered. It didn't right the ship. In fact, just like with Bruno, whose consigliere plotted against him. Testa's underboss, Pete Casella, plotted against Testa, along with, just like with Caponegro, he rallied some of the capos behind him. A year later, Pete Casella did the same thing, and rallied some of the capos behind him. And needless to say, it didn't work. Nicky Scarfo, who was Testa's best friend and consigliere, went to New York City after the nail bomb killed Testa. Pete Casella, who was the underboss, came to the Philadelphia mob, I believe that night, came to all the capos and said, "I'm taking over now. I have the blessing from New York City." And Nicky Scarfo said, "Not so fast. I haven't heard that. And I'm the liaison for this family to New York City." So Nicky Scarfo himself went to New York City that very night and got permission from the commission to ignore Pete Casella. They told Scarfo that Pete Casella was not sanctioned to murder Testa. Again, kind of like with Stanfa, Casella had a lot of friends in New York, and they got him a pass. Mm-hmm. And Scarfo came back that night and gathered everybody, and said, "Pete, you have to leave town." Pete and his brother Tony were kicked out of town, told to go to Florida immediately or they'd be killed. Pete Casella and Tony Casella were told to leave the function that this gathering. You're not only you're not boss, you're no longer in the family. See you later. We're lucky we didn't kill you. And at that point, Nicky Scarfo said, "I'm taking over. I've got permission from New York." And Scarfo at that point took power in late March 1981, and he held power for the next, well, it was roughly the next 8 or 9 years. He was only free for about 6 of them.
Right.
And it was just it was a mob reign that was littered with violence and bloodshed and animosity and bitterness. He was the antithesis of what a good La Cosa Nostra boss should be or could be. He was paranoid beyond belief, alienated himself from everybody, and was just obsessed with killing. Yeah. And it was, the best dons do use violence as a measure of last resort, mm-hmm. or only in circumstances that really need it,
right,
for a statement to be made. It's not something that should be a knee-jerk reaction to anything and everything. Yeah. And that's what it became with Scarfo, where he ordered 35 murders in 6 years.
Yeah, that's a lot. And yeah. I mean, I think I don't know if it was before he was boss or whatever. He done a little bit of time. Didn't he like stab a guy in a restaurant and kill him?
Yeah. So he had gotten into this is another piece of mythology that needs to be clarified. The myth is that Scarfo got into and this part's true, as part of the myth. Scarfo got into a fight at the Oregon Diner in South Philly in the early to mid 60s, and got into a fight with an Irish longshoreman over a seat at the counter, mm-hmm. and grabbed a knife from the counter and stabbed this guy to death. The mythology is that got Nicky Scarfo kicked out of Philadelphia by Angelo Bruno, and that he was exiled to Atlantic City.
Right.
Now, the part about him killing the longshoreman is true. The notion that he was exiled to Atlantic City after that is not true, but it picked up steam in the Scarfo narrative. But he was already in Atlantic City at that point. He wasn't exiled there. He had kind of always been there from the time he was an adult. He grew up in South Philly, but had a lot of interest in Atlantic City from an early point in his racketeering days.
Right.
So he did a really short, less than a year, I think, on that.
Yeah, I think it was like 2 years or a year and a half.
Yeah, a short period of time on the manslaughter, and then he did a year or two in the 70s on a contempt for refusing to testify and that was when he was locked up with Bruno. I believe Bruno, Testa, and Scarfo were all locked up together in Yardville for, I think, 73, 74, or maybe 74, 75.
Yeah, I didn't know that. And like you said earlier, a lot of murders done through there. He feuded with, what was the Riccobenes? He has a lot of feuds with them. Harry the Hunchback.
So his first war, I guess, was the Riccobene War. It was a one-time contemporary and friend, Harry the Hunchback Riccobene, who was a real OG, had been made like when he was like 14 or 15 years old, like back in the 20s.
Yeah, that might still be a record, I think.
And Riccobene was under Bruno, had been allowed to kind of do his own thing, run his own kind of family within the family. And all Bruno wanted was a Christmas gift. When Scarfo took over, he wasn't satisfied with just a Christmas gift. He sent word to Riccobene that there's a new sheriff in town, and that sheriff is demanding a piece of your rackets every month. It's not just a one-time yearly gift at Christmas. I want every month. I want you checking in with me and kicking up to me. And Riccobene, who wanted to be boss himself, and didn't really respect Scarfo as someone that outranked him, because Riccobene had been in the family longer, had felt he was more deserving of the boss's role than Scarfo. So he refused, and they went to war for about 2 years, 82 to 84. And a lot of bodies.
Yeah.
Harry Riccobene himself survived a phone booth hit.
That's the one I remember seeing about, where he said the guy just came up and unloaded on him, and somehow or another didn't kill him, or didn't manage to kill him.
Yeah, it was Wayne Grandy who did it, and now Wayne Grandy's son is on the verge of becoming boss of the Philadelphia mob. So it's 30, 40 years ago, and there's still connections and dots to be connected from 40 years ago.
Wow, that's crazy. Now, another guy that was with Nicky around that same time, and I've heard a lot of stuff about him, and maybe you can, just briefly kind of tell us about a guy, Salvie Testa. Now, was that Phil's son?
Yeah, Phil Testa's son, Nicky Scarfo's godson.
Yeah.
Salvie Testa was, my book was called, my famous book is called Mafia Prince, and it's about Crazy Phil Leonetti, who was Nicky Scarfo's nephew and surrogate son. And at the end of the day, he ended up being the mob prince, but the original mob prince, the true mob prince, was Salvie Testa. And Salvie was, if you went into a laboratory and you wanted to create the perfect gangster or the perfect mob figure, you'd come up with Salvie Testa. He was a guy that was, he checked all three boxes. He was loved, respected, feared. He was an earner. He was a tough guy. He was a ladies' man. He was charismatic. He could talk to people that weren't in the life and be articulate and come across likable. He really was everything that Nicky Scarfo and his dad weren't. I mean, his dad was almost, his face was almost like disfigured.
Yeah, I've seen some pictures of his face.
I don't know, it was acne and some other and
marks or something like that.
yeah, and Salvie was like out of central casting in Hollywood. I mean, he was like, he had model good looks.
Yeah.
And was someone that just commanded a room and was on the fast track. And then Nicky Scarfo became jealous of him. You know, really that was, when you break it down to its rawest form of what happened there. Phil Testa had made Nicky Scarfo and Phil Testa had promised each other when all this violence had started to erupt, that they would look out for each other's family if anything happened to them. Phil Leonetti, even though it was Nicky's nephew, Nicky had raised him as a son. Phil never had a father that was present. So they had both made promises to the other one. You know, if Nicky Scarfo said, if I go, you'll look after Phil like he's your own. And Phil Testa said, if I go, you have to look after Salvie as he's your own. And that was all agreed upon. And there was nobody more loyal to Nicky Scarfo than Salvie Testa. And I would say even more so probably than Phil Leonetti. Salvie would have taken a bullet, would have died for Nicky Scarfo. But Nicky Scarfo could not, there wasn't enough oxygen in the room. They both were being written about quite a bit in the local press. You know, Nicky was the seasoned vet, you know, at that time he was in his 50s, I believe. Salvie was in his 20s. And it all came to a head really with one big newspaper article. I believe it was the Washington Post. It might've been the New York Times. One of those big East Coast newspapers did a front page story and called Salvie the future of the American Mafia. And it just incensed Nicky, even though it wasn't like Salvie had
done anything himself
to have that article written. He doesn't have a press team or anything.
Right. And wasn't there something about a marriage or a
so then
wedding?
Right. So at the same time that article is written, Salvie Testa is engaged to be married to the daughter of Chucky Merlino, who is Nicky Scarfo's right-hand man and underboss. And Salvie's going to marry Maria Merlino. And it was going to be like a 500-person wedding. Stevie Wonder was hired to be the entertainment. It was going to be held at like the Ritz-Carlton in Philadelphia. It was going to be the mob wedding of the century. And about 3 weeks or less than a month before, when everything had been paid for, Salvie decided to break the engagement, and that he was more in love with his girlfriend than he was Maria Merlino. You gotta understand that you know, analogize this to, like, you know, kings and dukes and knights back in the yesteryear, where, you know, kingdoms would intermarry to continue a lineage or a legacy, or to bring two organizations together or two kingdoms together. So, you know, the Merlinos marrying into the Testas, you know, these are two, this is mob royalty on the East Coast,
right?
And they're cross-pollinating, and it was gonna, you know, really lock Salvie into that Scarfo Merlino. It was gonna kind of officially lock him in,
right? And
he decided that he was gonna call the wedding off, and Nicky used it as an excuse, to start building a case. Sorry, I just had a. Can you see? Sorry,
yeah. You back?
Building a case to murder him, and he convinced Chucky Merlino that this was some great act of disrespect, and that it wasn't just disrespecting Maria, it was disrespecting Chucky. And it was really just Nicky burning with jealousy, feeling that Salvie was gonna, I don't know, organize behind his back, which would never have happened, I don't believe.
Yeah, I think he would have sat tight and, bided his time until Nicky, he would eventually went to jail anyway with everything he was doing. And
so, but at the end of the day, Nicky Scarfo had, Salvie's best friends kill him.
Yep. Well,
And that was really
the Crow. Was that who that was?
Nah, Nicky the Crow was involved in it, but it was really Joey Punch, who set him up. Joey Punch was his closest friend, best friend in the whole world, and Scarfo took Joey Punch aside and said, "I don't care if you pull the trigger or not. You're bringing him to this hit."
Yeah.
And Punch said, "I'll do it, but I won't pull the trigger." And but Punch still, brought him to the location where he was killed. And it was the beginning of the end for the Scarfo regime, because that told everybody in that crime family that nobody was safe.
Yeah.
And if Nicky's going to go after his own surrogate kid, then
that's going to have
he'll kill everybody. And then I think that was, honestly, I think, as crazy as that sounds, that was Nicky's end game. He wanted to just kill everybody. He used to say, he used to get the whole family together, and he'd be like, "You guys aren't living up to your end of the bargain. You guys aren't doing your job. You're all traitorous. You're all subversive. I'm gonna kill all of you, and I'm gonna start from scratch. I'm gonna bring a hit team from New York. I'm gonna murder all 30 or 40 of you, and I'm gonna start handpicking my own guys and build back up 30 or 40 new guys." I mean, that's how crazy this guy was. And I think if left unchecked, he very well might have done that.
Yeah, he was definitely one for the record books as far as keeping your head on straight. I mean, he was a very loose cannon. I think they said that they had tried for a while to do that hit on Salvie, but he was so slick.
Yeah, it was about 5 months. About 5 months.
Hip to the game that he didn't allow himself to be in situations like that. And when it comes to guys like that, you usually have to go to a best friend, somebody that they really feel like they can trust.
So he broke off. The wedding was supposed to be in April, and they didn't murder him until October.
Wow.
So they started trying to kill him, I think, in May. Mm-hmm. So he lasted 5 months.
Yeah. And
it wasn't until his best friend, got him and set him up. He didn't think Joey Punch would turn on him, but Joey Punch didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Nicky Scarfo, I'm going to kill you if you don't set Salvie up.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, like you said, he was basically forced into it. It was either Salvie or him. Yeah. Now Nicky winds up going to prison. They got jammed up like on an extortion scam. I think Nicky the Crow was maybe extorting like a land developer.
That was the start of it, and then that rolled into a regular racketeering and murder case.
Right.
It all came down in March of '87.
Now, one thing I heard, and maybe you can shed some light on this, Salvie, I think, had a piece of property that was passed on to him by his dad. And then he, in turn, sold that to a land developer that had an idea of what he wanted to turn Atlantic City into. And that land developer is a pretty well-known guy. He was actually our former president of the United States, Donald Trump. Is that accurate?
True. Yeah, that's true. He bought a piece of property from the Testas in the early '80s after Phil Testa was murdered. I believe it would have been '82 or '83.
Right. He bought it for like 3 times, I think, the value at the time.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I was just curious if that was true. I'd heard that, and I mean, I know obviously at some point in Atlantic City with everything Trump doing, he didn't have any choice but to have dealings or rub shoulders with organized crime.
In New York City too, all the building he was doing in the '70s and '80s, he was having to do business with the mob because you couldn't do business in the world of construction or real estate in New York at that time and not do business with the mob.
Yeah, you didn't have a choice. If you didn't take their concrete guys or their laborers, I mean, you didn't get shit built. It was just that simple.
Exactly.
So when he goes out at that point, is that kind of when Merlino enters to the fold, when Scarfo goes to prison? Because I think
that's when he comes into the picture, but he doesn't take power for another 6-7 years. But
because he attempts to kill Scarfo's son, right? At like a restaurant on Halloween.
Yeah. So in the late '80s, Nicky Scarfo's in prison. His uncle, Tony Buck Piccolo, is the acting boss, and you had a group of sons and nephews of the Scarfo regime that had all got locked up in '87. There was a lot of sons and nephews that were on the street still, led by Mikey Ciancaglini and Joey Merlino. Mikey Chang's dad, Chicky Ciancaglini, was one of Scarfo's top capos. And Joey Merlino was the son of Chucky Merlino and the nephew of Yogi Merlino, another set of capos, or Chucky Merlino was the underboss. So they were in their mid to late 20s at that point, and around 87, 88, Mikey Chang and Joey Merlino start trying to put together eventually what becomes the modern day Philadelphia Mafia today. Right. The seeds that were started to get planted in 87, 88, 89, as you mentioned, Joey allegedly launches a hit on Nicky Scarfo's son and shoots him in a crowded restaurant on Halloween '89. All of that had stemmed from the fact that Nicky Scarfo at the end of his reign had shelved Chucky Merlino, and it told Joey that he could no longer be in South Philly, that if he showed his face in South Philly, they'd kill him because of Chucky Merlino had a bit of a drinking problem, and the drinking problem started to get in the way of some mob business. So Scarfo said, you're done. And these were his, one of his closest friends. And just like Nicky Scarfo was a god, had baptized Salvie Testa, he'd also baptized Joey Merlino. So this is like a father figure telling you you can no longer live in your own city and they're going to kill you if you. So Joey was very upset and he wanted to get back at the Scarfo. So he tried to murder Nicky Jr. He was unsuccessful, but nonetheless, that really it announced his presence with authority, right, in terms of someone that was a name and a figure to be recognized and reckoned with in terms of leadership in the mob in Philadelphia. But at that point, you had Joey go to prison for an armored car heist in '89. He was locked up between '89 and '92. And John Stamfa come back to Philadelphia after a short prison stint, and the Gambinos install him as the boss. He's Sicilian. He had been involved in Bruno's assassination, and really was, even though he had been in Philly in the '70s, he was an interloper. He wasn't someone that was born in Philly. He wasn't anyone that had really didn't have a ton of loyalty on the street. Wasn't incredibly well liked. So he went and imported a lot of loyalists from Sicily. And meanwhile, Joey is in prison, and he starts taking counsel from an old school Philadelphia labor racketeer, drug dealer, hitman named Merlino-Natale. And Ralph gives him credibility with the old school mob guard in New York. Ralph had been in prison for 15 years and made a lot of connections, had been a big Angelo Bruno guy in the 60s and 70s, troubleshooting for Bruno and the unions. And Natale, I would say that both Ralph Natale, who was 60, and Joey, who was 30, they both used each other. Right. Joey needed Ralph to co-sign him with the powers that be in New York, and Ralph needed young, strapping, ambitious, fearless soldiers on the street, doing his fighting for him. So they joined forces and declared war on John Stamfa. And between 91 and 94, there were about over half a dozen murders, including that's where the brothers turned on each other. Mike, the Ciancaglinis, there were 3 brothers and a father. The father and the oldest brother were locked up, and the middle brother and the baby brother were on the street when this all happened. And they ended up on opposite sides of this thing. Mikey Chang and Joey were the leaders of the insurgents, And then Joey Chang was named John Stanfa's underboss.
Right.
And I think it was an attempt by Stanfa to
broker peace, maybe, or
broker peace, or give an olive branch. But Joe Ciancaglini and Mikey Ciancaglini, although they were siblings, there had always been issues between them dating back to childhood that I think got played out in their adult lives in this mob war. And it didn't really help that Stanfa named Joey Ciancaglini his underboss. In fact, it made things worse.
Right.
And, Mikey Chang was convinced that in, I believe it was spring of 92, possibly spring of 93, he survived an ambush coming back to his house from a basketball game where masked men in shotguns chased him and unloaded on him, and actually unloaded into his house with his little daughters and one of his sons present. And Mikey Chang believed to the day he died that one of those masked men with a shotgun was his brother, Joey.
Wow.
And everything really erupted even more than it had been erupting. And then you had the Ciancaglinis trying to kill each other. Mikey retaliated by going into his brother's place of business, and Joey and some other people shot him up, almost killed him, left him injured for the rest of his life. He's maimed. I mean, this happened back in 30 years ago. Joey Ciancaglini still can't really function as a fully healthy adult man.
Wasn't that recorded?
Yeah, it was one of the first, if not the first mob hit ever.
They said, the first mob hit that was ever recorded on tape. I don't know if they had it surveilled.
There was an FBI surveillance camera that was on the telephone pole across from the diner, right, where Joey Ciancaglini worked. So a couple months after that, Mikey Ciancaglini's murdered, and things got worse. And then the government
took a bullet, didn't he?
Joey took a bullet in the attack on Mikey Chang. They both got caught in August of '93 walking out of their clubhouse. Joey took a shot in the back. Mikey took, I think, only one shot, but it went through his heart.
Yeah, it killed him.
And he died right in Joey's arms. The government interceded in the spring of '94 and indicted John Stanfa's entire organization, which gave the victory to Merlino-Natale almost by default.
Right.
And just so happened that Ralph Natale was walking out of prison a couple months later. So Ralph walked out in late summer, early fall of '94, and him and Joey took over the Philadelphia Mafia. Joey, it was very unconventional. Ralph had never been made before, so Joey had to make Ralph, and then Ralph declared himself the boss and named Joey his underboss. Like I said, it was very non-traditional, unconventional.
Got the young guy making the old guy, and then vice versa.
It upset a lot of people with the way it happened, but that's what happened. And then they ran the family in tandem until '98, when Ralph got locked up on a parole violation. And Ralph had really lost his grip before he went to prison, or before he got violated in the summer of '98. By that point, there was no more trust or really any love lost between Natale and his younger group of soldiers, who he had a lot of political capital with those guys when he came out of prison in '94. But by '97, '98, it had begun to wear thin. It really began to wear thin, and the younger guys didn't like Ralph anymore. Ralph was a big talker, someone that was kind of a legend in his own mind, and often boasted of these big mob schemes that he was putting together. And at first, it would get all these younger guys all excited and thinking that this family is going to the next level. But at the end of the day, Ralph could never make any of it happen. And really, when it came down to what Ralph was as a boss for 4 years, really all he was a drug dealer. He was someone that could put together drug deals like he did back in the 70s. But he couldn't put together any. He got his hooks into the mayor of Camden, but nothing much really came of that.
One of the guys that they had dealing what was Ron Previty. I think he was actually brought in by Stampa, but unbeknownst to a lot of those guys, including Joey, Ron was actually an informant.
Right. So then, Ralph had a situation where one of his closest, his bodyguard, his driver, a guy that he was with almost every day, had been working for the government pretty much the whole time and taping all of his conversations. And then there was some real junior high school crap going on behind the scenes. We can sit there and we can talk about how it was a lot of like 7th grade gossipy stuff, but the fact is it took a big toll on what was going on, and it was all related to Ralph's relationship with a young woman who was a contemporary of Joey and his guys, Ruthie Sessio, and had grown up with those guys. Some of those guys had dated her, and Ralph decided to take her as his girlfriend and really allowed her to exceed, what a girlfriend or a side piece is expected to be in that world. And it became a point by 97 where, Ruthie, who had been just kind of Ruthie from the corner, these guys are now being told that, they can't call her Ruthie anymore. They got to call her Ruth Ann. They got to open the door for her wherever she is. They got to kiss her ring wherever she is. And then Ruthie was acting like she had authority to call shots in the mob. And then Ralph is bringing her to events that guys had their wives at, events that you weren't supposed to bring your girlfriend to. It got real out of hand. And then at one point they were all out at a party. I believe it was the summer of 97 and, or maybe late 97. And Ruthie hit Ralph in front of all of his guys, smacked him. And it just, all those guys, I heard that there was a kind of a mini huddle in the back of that restaurant nightclub maybe a half hour after Ruthie had slapped Ralph in public. And they all said, if Ralph doesn't go home and kill her right now, we're done.
Yeah.
So they expected we'll never see Ruthie again. We'll be okay with Ralph going forward. Or if Ralph doesn't do that, which he didn't, he would never even thought about it. That they had cut off from Ralph at that point. If he can't get control of his own 30-year-old girlfriend and is going to let her disrespect him in public like that, they didn't really want to have anything to do with him. And as a result, when Ralph got locked up, they pushed him out. Joey took over. Joey was in charge the whole time anyway.
He was. I think he more or less used Ralph as kind of a figurehead for somebody to go after if they wanted to.
Yeah.
But that's what Joey was really the one kind of calling the shots, from what I understand.
And then they knew. This is some of the brilliance of Joey, is that this was a long con. I mean, Joey knew the whole time to be feeding Ralph false information. So if or when it ever came to a fact that Ralph was going to go to the feds and point the finger at Joey, everything he'd be telling the feds, things that he assumed were the truth because Joey had been telling him, were in fact all lies. And it came out, that's what happened. Ralph decided to go to the government and became the star witness against Joey at their big racketeering murder trial back in 2001. And Ralph got torn apart on the stand because he was saying things that, physical evidence disputed, other witnesses disputed, stuff that he was insisting had happened or occurred during hits or people that were involved in hits. And it was all jumbled information. You know, if I'm not saying these are real people, but I'm just making up names. You know, if Jimmy Donuts is the person that killed this guy that they're on trial with, Joey told him it was you know, Johnny Lemonade.
Right.
So Ralph gets up on the stand and says, well, I know Jimmy Donuts is the one who did the shooting. And then they can immediately show, actually, Jimmy Donuts was in Florida that day.
Yeah.
Johnny Lemonade was the one. And Ralph just looked stupid. It's like, well, you don't know who was assigned to the hits that you were ordering?
Yeah, where's your credibility? Yeah.
So at the end of the day, they didn't get Joey or any of his guys in any of those murders that they brought. They got them on racketeering, and they all went away to prison for 10 years, and they've all been out for 10 years.
Yeah, Joey's a smart guy, man. You know, I mean, he's done his stretches here and there. I think that's probably like the longest one that he did.
Yeah, he's only done about, he's only done about 15 years, which at the end, less than 15 years, which at the end of the day, for what he's gotten away with
and how long he's been in it.
Good. Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's not about, because I talked with Anthony Ruggiano on the show, and he said when he first got into the life, his father just sat down and told him, he's like, look, you know, if you're going to be in this life, remember one thing, going to jail was part of the fucking job. So they understand that that's part of it. So like you said, 15 years for the, you know, however long, 30 plus years he's been in it, you know, that's not terrible. And to never catch a life sentence.
One sentence where he did 12, and then one sentence where he did 2, so that's 14, and then
had a little bullshit in a couple years.
He did about a year, 6 months for a gambling thing, so it's about 15.
Yeah, he got, somebody had him on a wiretap over, it was like a $200 gambling.
Yeah, it was a bet. They were trying to nail him on racketeering, and all they really got at the end of the day was him placing an illegal bet.
Yeah, and most of the time Joey would take it to trial, which I think he did take it to trial originally, and it was
and it was a hung jury, and they dropped all the racketeering counts, and he just pled to the one gambling count.
Yeah,
and he'll tell you that he's the only person ever to be convicted of placing a bet.
Probably, yeah.
Sure, he's right.
Well, when you can't get it for anything else, you pick what you can grab, I guess. Well, man, I've had a good time with that. You fed me some information that I didn't know. Some of it I was, familiar with, and then some of it you kind of shedded some light on. So we appreciate it.
Well, I think, there's a lot left to be written in this story.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a great first 2 acts, but the third act really has not been written, and I think we'll see it written in the next 5 to 10 years. Right now, a bunch of Joey's guys are about to go to prison. His right hand is his underboss and best friend, handsome Stevie Mazzone, is going on trial in July. His protege and the heir apparent, Baby Dom Grande, is about to go do 7-8 years in prison. I heard that there's going to be another racketeering indictment that's coming down, most likely in the next year. And I heard it most likely will not include Joey. So, and intentionally, I think that the government is looking to scoop up everybody that's connected to Joey and put them on the inside, have Joey on the outside, and then try to get some of these people so hot and bothered that they'll give Joey up for the murders that the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office are, in addition to about the half dozen murders that they brought in the 2001 racketeering case that he beat, there's another half dozen murders roughly that they want to bring and charge him with. Some of those hits related to the war with Stamfa. Some of those hits related to some affairs of the heart. Stevie Mazzone, who's going on trial in July. There was a member of the crime family named Dutchie Avicoli, who was very close with Joey and Stevie, fought on their side of the war, but in the aftermath of that war, started having an affair with Stevie's wife, and disappeared on a trip with Joey and Stevie. And I know that there's been a lot of digging going on in New Jersey trying to find Dutchie's body. So that's something that still hangs out there. And then you have Johnny Gong's Casasanto, who was murdered in the early 2000s. And Johnny Gongs had fought on the other side of the war, had fought with Stamfa. And then when Joey went to prison, Johnny Gongs was running around town with Joey's wife. So Johnny Gongs got killed. If you believe the FBI, was another one of Joey's proteges that did that hit. So they're looking at those two, Dutchie and Johnny Gongs, as well as about 3 or 4 other ones that they want to bring. So we'll see. Like I said, I don't think we've seen the end of this by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, no, I don't either. And we've seen this play out before in situations like with John Gotti. When the government wants you, they're going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming. And
yeah,
you know,
what I point out to people, though, when they try to make the comparison with Joey and Gotti, and there's definitely comparisons to be made. I tell everyone, John Gotti had a 5-year run.
Yeah. Joey had a lot longer.
Right now is at year 30.
Yeah.
So, and he's only 60. At the end of the day, Joey could end up having a 50-year run. So it's kind of unfair, at least right now, to compare him to Gotti in that regard, because Gotti was like a shooting star. Like, he was one of the big names in the world in 1986, 1987, 1988. By 89, 90, the game was over with.
Yeah. Well, I just, a comparison for me, as far as like how the government would do anything.
No, that part's true.
Put all their resources, to go after him. And to Joey's credit too, to be able to do that in this age with the, more technology. And I mean, hell, he was on Instagram for a little while.
Yeah.
When he was down there in Boca Raton. So it's, for him to be able to do that and still run, or however, allegedly still run the family, it's nothing short of remarkable how he's able to pull that off and stay out of jams the way he has. So I'm like you. I think there's still more to come, but definitely a hell of a story, from when it started.
I call him the Instagram Don. So
yeah.
I don't think he's not just the face of the American Mafia in the 21st century. He's the face of new millennium organized crime. Right. That you can do, like you're saying, that you could do all of this. He doesn't have to be in Philadelphia. He hasn't lived in Philadelphia since 1998, 99. He came out of prison in 2011 and relocated to Florida. But I think the last thing I'll say is, I think the pendulum swings both ways. So in one sense, he's been really smart to insulate himself the way he has. But as the pendulum swings in the other direction, you got a lot of guys that have been putting a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this organization, the Bruno Scarfo crime family. Just talking about since Joey got out of prison in 2011. There are guys that are in the kitchen. There's a lot of heat in that. Joey is, down the street sipping a pina colada, while all of his guys are really in the thick of it. And he used to be in the thick of it with them. He hasn't been in the thick of it with them for the last decade. And he just expects money to flow down to Florida to where he is. And I believe it has, but at what cost? So I think you're having a situation now where, if I'm reading the tea leaves, you have a certain group of guys that are always going to be loyal to him, because those are his childhood confidants, guys that he's been with since he was literally 5-6 years old. And I don't think those guys would ever turn on him. Right. But there are the guys outside of the inner circle that still have access to him, that still do work for him, that might have information that can put him away for a long time, life sentences, if they were involved in murders. And I don't know how thrilled everyone is with just he's the head of the family. He built, to a degree, he built what's there now. He built it, and he should just be able to, take a piece in perpetuity. Yeah. and it, his mind, he's like, it's my family. I can do whatever the hell I want to do.
Right.
If I'm going to live in freaking South Africa, I can do it. And you'll still be supposed to be sending me tribute. But I think if you have a situation where, what I'm hearing at least, that there's going to be there's already guys getting locked up. But if there are more guys that are going to be locked up in the next year or two, and he's out here living the rock star life that he lives,
yeah,
I don't know. I just know that's the government's plan, is to build up animosity from his people to try to get one of them to.
Yeah, and because I mean, at some point in time, if those envelopes quit coming, what can he do if he doesn't have that faction, like you said, that's loyal to him to straighten that out? At some point, he can't really.
He's got no legitimate income.
Yeah,
he lives in $1 million house. He drives $1 million car. He dresses, like a billionaire, but he can't account for any of it.
Yeah, he had his restaurant, but I don't think that's been closed for quite a while now. Yeah. Well, I certainly appreciate you stopping by the show, man. It's been good. I've had a fun time. I'm always fascinated to hear about this Philadelphia. Tell everybody a little bit about that book you wrote, where they can go to pick that up if they want to read some more on it, and anything else you want to plug, any future projects or anything like that.
Yeah, Mafia Prince. Get it anywhere books are sold. It's the story of the Philadelphia Mafia in the 70s and 80s, told through Crazy Phil Leonetti's eyes. He was the underboss to Nicky Scarfo. I wrote his autobiography. Check out my podcast, the original Gangsters Podcast, wherever you consume Spotify, Apple, iTunes. My web magazine is called Gangster Report, www.gangsterreport.com. All everyday breaking news, pop culture, gangsters, mob, Italian mob, black mob, Jewish mob. You can get it all there. And then I got a History Channel project that's going to be coming out, tied to the Hoffa dig. That's going to be happening in the spring. And I have this Black Mafia family project that's on Starz that everyone should check out. Absolutely,
man. You got a lot of stuff coming down the pipe. We'll have to do a Hoffa one a little bit later on, maybe after they do that dig, and we'll see what happens, because that's another one. That's another one that can consume another hour or two, because whoever the hell done that one, they knew what they were doing, because this is still being talked about all these years later. All right, man. Well, I certainly enjoyed it. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Hollywood Wade, and that was Mafia historian Scott Burnstein. And unfortunately, we are out of time. Tune in next week for another episode of Crime and Entertainment. Scott, we appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks, Wade.